Welcome to Paperweights, the podcast where two self-proclaimed gym rats and shooting enthusiasts delve into the world of literature with a sprinkle of humor. Although their biceps could crush a walnut, don't let that intimidate you. They also have a nerdy side. Mike and Brandon have a voracious appetite for reading, particularly in the fantasy genre, and they want to share their passion with you. So grab your protein shake and your favorite novel and join us for a humorous and insightful journey into the world of books with Paperweights.
Welcome back to another episode of the Paperweights. I'm your host, Brandon.
And Justin.
And today, as you see, we are joined by a special guest. We have Scott Lynch, author of the Gentleman Bastard series. Our sequence, I think, is the term that's used instead of series.
Yeah, sequence is way more pretentious and elegant and, very much sequence is the $20 gourmet burger version of series, so sequence.
But bunch of those hollowed out metal lettering with the clear light bulb type situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
I like it.
Awesome. So before we dive in, we're gonna have a fun conversation. Got a few questions lined up, and then kind of maybe let Scott just talk about some of the things he's up to these days, and the future of this sequence. But before we dive in, we are sponsored by Mudcat Whiskers, which is a Louisiana small business that specializes in men's grooming products, specifically beard care. I personally use the beard wash, conditioner, and balm daily. I also have several different scents of the oils. Really do help to keep those manes tamed and free of dandruff and feeling good. But if you don't have hair on your face or know anybody that does, I'm sorry for you. But they do also have candles, and they do have sorry, my mind went colognes. There we go. I'll get it there. Sorry, some noise distracted me. They have colognes.
Male perfume.
Yes, male perfume. I think your audio went out.
Mine?
No, Scott's.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just being a jackass. Forgive me. Like they got cupcakes, they got truck axles, they got hydraulic pipes, they got everything. Everything for beard care, inner tubes.
So you can head on over to their website, www.mudcatwhiskers.com. Use code Paperweights at checkout, and you'll save yourself 15%. So, all right. So Scott, do you want to do a brief introduction of yourself, where you're from, how long you've been writing, maybe any other jobs that you've had or currently have?
Sure. How long have I been an unemployable wastrel? Well, God, almost 25 years now. Okay, so I'm from Minnesota originally. I was born in St. Paul in 1978. So I'm 23 years old, and
Okay. Math checks out.
Yeah, I lived in the Midwest. I lived in Minnesota, for many years, and I lived in Wisconsin for 11 years, and then fell in love and moved out here. Fell in love with a woman who wanted to live in New England, and I like New England a lot too. So we've lived in Massachusetts since 2016.
Awesome.
Let's see. Prior to becoming an unemployable wastrel, I was a dishwasher. I was a waiter. I was an office manager. I worked at a lumber yard. I was a prep cook. And I did some intermittent freelance editing and stuff like that. And I did self-publishing in the role-playing field around the time Dungeons and Dragons 3 was a new thing and the D20 system was a new thing. And that's how I scrapped my meager living together for a couple of years before I accidentally sold my first novel in 2004. Since then, I've written as a primary profession. I was also a paid-on-call firefighter in Wisconsin for 11 years. That was from 2005 to 2016. And I meant to get back into it when I moved out here, but I discovered just the fabulous power of laziness. No, I discovered that realistically speaking, it's one of those three options, pick two, and the options are have the career that I have, be married, be a firefighter, and I barely managed to hold those things together for a number of years, and I have to pick two and stick with it this time. Also, it's a lot different looking at it when you are 47 than when you are 26, because that's when I went through Fire 1 and Fire 2 fire training the first time. Mysterious weaknesses have developed in my knees, in my back, in my everything since then. So I wouldn't trade those 11 years for anything. I'm not entirely sure I'm ever meant to crawl into a burning house ever again. So
Yeah.
I try to do other things these days. But yeah, that's me. I've written books, and that's really all I do these days.
I too am getting old and discovering pains in places they shouldn't be, but well now to permanently be. It
It's such
sucks.
bullshit.
Yes.
It's total bullshit. And I don't know why we do this to ourselves.
I don't know either.
Speaking
I-
of pains, a week ago
the hell did you do?
I completely tore the tendons, both tendons of my pec
Jesus.
from my humerus bone. So I'm going to have
You
to
look
have,
like you got smacked with a mallet along the inside of your arm there. That looks horrendous.
yeah, it's going to require surgery to reattach my pec muscle over so
Oh
that
my
I can
God, I
continue
bet
to
that
do
made a
my
noise
lifting.
you could hear inside your skull when you did that. That looks horrible.
Yeah,
Oof.
it was not fun. So
Okay, wow. Good
uh,
talk, everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome to the horror show, where we
Yeah.
just show injuries for an hour.
Welcome to middle-aged men talking about life. This
Yeah.
hurts.
There you go.
Yeah.
It fell off. It exploded.
New England, my wife and I have we have a fondness for New England. We got married in January, 12 years ago, and we honeymooned in Boston in January. And then for our 10-year anniversary.
Or he's not supposed to. Oh, okay, there we go.
Me or... All right, yeah. Oh,
What?
you blew up for a second, Brandon.
Oh, I blew up for a second?
Yeah.
Oh.
You froze for like 10 seconds.
Oh.
This is going great.
It is.
You said 12 years, and then all of a sudden, the Phantom Zone grabbed you.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, being married for 12 years, it does that sometimes. No, we honeymooned in Boston in January.
Hey, did
And
you
then
go to Arisia, or were you just in Boston?
we were in Boston. That was it.
Okay.
We went back for our 10-year anniversary, and we this time we ventured out. We actually made it down to Newport, Rhode Island, and went up to
Cool.
Salem.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
My wife, she likes to tell everybody whenever we were on our honeymoon that she was looking at for sale houses and apartments in Boston.
Yes.
Yes. The prices are astronomical out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we live about 90 minutes west of Boston, and you could, anytime we wanted to quadruple the value of our house, we could just put it on a truck and drive it about 70 miles east. No, thank you. The two big Boston area conventions every year are Arisia in January and Boscone in February, because obviously what you want to do in those months is visit sunny tropical Boston and just enjoy that balmy wind off the North Atlantic.
Yeah, I remember on our honeymoon we were staying and it was called the Kimpton Hotel. And it's right down from TD Gardens, and we had the concierge downstairs. We were walking out to go do something, and it was like 0 degrees outside, and he goes, "Do y'all want to? You want me to call you a taxi?" And we're like, "Nah, we're gonna walk." And we walked, and it was fine. But he was looking at us like we were crazy, like, and we're from Louisiana, so um, we don't get 0 degree weather. But it
Yeah,
was
I mean,
cool.
there's good luck and there's bad luck. And when you get the bad luck and you get, this knife wind off the water passing through the buildings and getting concentrated and accelerated, you do get your tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker sort of effect.
I will have to say that Boston, so down in Louisiana, when it gets cold, all the stores and everything turn the heater on. Um, which, if you have a big jacket on, like you're gonna have to take it off or you're gonna be sweating. But what are you gonna do with it? You gonna hold it while you walk around? No. But in Boston, they just understand that everybody's bundled up, so they keep it at like, a little less of a cold temperature, but the heater's not blasting. So you can still walk around in your
Yeah,
coats.
Boston in winter is a good place to be some sort of Lovecraftian experiment that can't let the room temperature get above freezing. It's very liberating.
I'll take it sometimes with these Louisiana summers, though. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, I've still not yet been to Louisiana. Obviously, I mean, I was in Mississippi earlier this year, which is where we met, and I mean, I liked it, but I mean, that was March, so like that was I feel probably not the full traditional Biloxi experience.
Yeah, if you want to truly experience a southern humid day, just come down to New Orleans in like, middle of July, middle of
Woohoo!
September. Um, but no, you'll find something down here if you do come to Louisiana.
I mean, we were in Atlanta for Dragon Con just last month, and it was unexpectedly, I mean, a genuinely mild week as far as those things go. I mean, going to Atlanta in the butt end of August sounds like it's going to be a pretty miserable experience, but actually it was very livable. And then the other place down south that we frequently visit, for certain values of down south, is my wife's father lives in Winston-Salem. So we tend to visit North Carolina at least once a year whenever we can. But Winston-Salem is, I mean, it's up there in elevation. So, it has its own very specific sort of climate that is, again, really pleasantly nice. So all of my Southern experiences are fake Southern experiences. I'm like, it's always been kind of mild down there.
yeah,
Oh,
I,
nice.
I'm always surprised when I hear that, Kentucky and Virginia are considered southern states. I'm like, that feels like so northern. Especially like, I mean, the elevation there is so much higher. And so like the temperatures are cooler. And so it's like, sure, it's below the Mason-Dixon line or whatever they're calling it these days. Um, but it's a lot cooler weather because you got the higher elevation. So
Yeah, the to get to North Carolina for that trip, we often drive down through Virginia, down through the Shenandoah Valley, where we've got some friends who live in the area and a couple really good pizza parlors that we know about. So there's natural stopping points, and driving through the Shenandoah Valley is legitimately just one of the most beautiful, beautiful spots in the entire United States.
that
And
sounds
like
amazing.
worth it in its own right, even if you're not actually going anywhere. But so yeah, well, I like that.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to get started on some of our questions? I have a few.
Get to work, have a point. Okay, sure, if I must. Okay.
So I don't know how many Justin has gone, but we'll try to go
Yeah,
one for one.
you guys hit me with whatever you want.
So the first thing I wrote down for a question is, where did you come up with this idea of the Eldren
Hmm.
in your books?
Um, just a general fascination with that whole concept of there are hidden things that came before. It undergirds an awful lot of classic weird fiction. I mean, it's a major element in the works of Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and Carl Edward Wagner and Manly Wade Wellman. Um, and it's I find so much, even if I am very much a skeptic, and I don't actually believe in Atlantis or hollow kingdoms at the center of the earth. It is just a really, really fascinating toy to play with. Something to just roll around in your fictional worlds and just contemplate, how big the scale of time really, really is. That we are members of a species that has recorded history of about 8,000 years. But if you go back 10,000 years, there are still mammoths walking around. You go back 40,000 years, there are still those upright werewolf-like walking alligators down in Australia. They're a marvelous, horrendous, uh, uncanny valley prehistoric monstrosity. You go back in time 18,000 years, the ice is a mile high above Boston. The glaciers had not even really begun to carve the landscape in North America that we even recognize. So there's so much room in deep time to hide so many interesting things. And part of the whole fantastic experience that I'm always trying to get at is those hints of the numinous, those hints of bigger things that are kind of peeking through the canvas. And I think that so much of the best fantasy, so much of the most haunting and memorable fantasy has those aspects. The Wheel of Time gets a lot of mileage out of the fact that it is, the wreckage, the post-apocalyptic wreckage of a world that's not exactly our world, but is kind of a mirror of our world. The Lord of the Rings obviously is, we see a sliver of it during its last age of magic and grandeur as that magic is going out of the world. And that's where a lot of its emotional power comes from, is just that hint that in previous times there were mightier cities, bigger civilizations, grander magics, and it's all lost and faded. So the Eldren are meant to hit those notes of a little bit mysterious, a little bit compelling, a little bit sinister. They're there to make you wonder. The big question that some of the characters in my third novel raise is, what exactly happened to these guys? They kind of vanished in the Eldrin equivalent of leaving the dinner on the table, leaving the chores undone. So that just doesn't seem like it was a very planned or controlled thing. And I love the implications of that. I can't guarantee that I'm ever going to explain any of it, but yeah,
That was my
chalk it up
next
to
question.
love of mystery.
Yeah, having gotten into Lovecraft this past year, it was really cool reading that and being like, "Oh, this is very Lovecraftian." And I also like how, one of the cool things about Lovecraft is it's not really explained, so we don't actually even know what they look like, if they're
Mhm.
humanoid or Cthulhu monsters or anything like that. Just fun.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, my next question, and you answered it, was like, are we going to get more of the backstory, or is it just going to remain a mystery, which is fun?
Well, the thing is that from time to time I will, if I get an idea or something strikes me, or I find something, yeah, I trip over something elegant in my, the nobbled gray lemon that serves as my brain. Um, I will happily move it into the text, but for the most part, I mean, I it can be very difficult to draw the line between sloppy world building and adequate representation of mystery. And you always want to have the one rather than the other. The real world is full of mystery. The reality that we inhabit is full of unanswerable questions. And since we are, ideally, even when writing fantasy, we're trying to write authentic psychological portraits of human beings. We're trying to write authentic cultural portraits of human societies. We're always writing about ourselves, even when we're writing about, people who live on a completely different planet. Um, you're not simulating our world if you do not put holes in the column of reality, places where mysteries can hide. So I think it is kind of imperative that I not explain everything, because there's really nothing that is more destructive to the romance and these particular atmosphere of a fictional setting than over explaining every single fucking thing. Pardon my French. I don't know if you swear on this podcast or not,
You're
or
good.
bleep it out, or I just screwed
Swear,
things up with your sponsors.
swear
No.
Um,
away.
all right, fucking A. I will try to control myself, but I'm known to occasionally do that. So it's I think it's essential. I'm a big horror fan as well as a fantasy writer and fantasy fan, and I think that many of the emotional landscapes of fantasy and horror overlap directly. One of the reasons that I like cosmic horror so much, I'm not a huge fan of like body horror or slasher horror. I like really contemplative, eerie, what is out there, what is going on sort of horror.
Event
And
Horizon type stuff.
yeah, one of the things that I often say is that for me, real horror, something that makes me go, "Woo, that is really creepy." It is a cousin to awe. That is like the sensation you get from really, really good cosmic horror is not just disquiet and a sense of threat, but a sense of awe at the magnitude of it all, at the depth of the questions, at our small size in the face of whatever immensity it is that is threatening us. So I find that those sensations go very much hand in hand, and you deflate them entirely if you shine a light into every crack, if you unearth every mystery, if you date every single event. It seems to me to be a fruitless exercise. Readers are always free to speculate. They're always free to write fanfic. They're always free to, build their own mental models. I certainly build, my own headcanon for stuff that I like, but to the point of actually confirming it, to the point of answering everything, no, I'm never actually going to answer everything.
Are
Uh,
you
And
one
I'm
of the?
I'm But I mean, I'm also trying not to just be lazy. I'm trying to be
Yeah.
very choosy about when I don't answer.
Are you one of those authors that has like a story Bible and like if you have stuff laid out, or just kind of like you kind of have it in your mind, but
I have vast quantities of notes and material. To call it something as organized as a Bible would be a lie. I've been meaning to, since 2004, really like the ideal time to have built a Bible for the Gentleman Bastard sequence would have been about 21 years ago. The second most ideal time is now-ish, which is when I'm finally getting around to it, because I've discovered that basically having written three books and nearly finished a fourth, I have discovered that the total number of novel-sized things I can keep straight in my head with only occasional mistakes is three. You go beyond three, and you just my mom, when I was a kid, I'm the oldest of three brothers, and so at one point when I was a teenager, my mom just stopped calling us by our individual names and just started cycling through our names. Scott, Kevin, Brian, Kevin, Scott, and we used to mock her mercilessly for this. But now that I've written four books, I understand how difficult counting past three gets at a certain point in your life. You're just like, fuck it, I give up. So I have lots of material. I could have organized it better. Like that would probably be the title of my autobiography. I have lots of shit. I could have organized it better.
one more thing on the Eldren right now. I really loved the uh, the story you had in book 3 of the rooms at the top of the bridges.
Ah, yes.
That was awesome, and like we discussed it on the
Thank you.
podcast when we were talking about it. It just kind of reminded me of like the movie The Keep or any of those Nazi cultist movies and stories that you get. You get little bits of it in Indiana Jones as well. Just kind of like, oh, there's something crazy up there.
Hmm.
So,
It must, because, Locke, Locke lives in a world where, the supernatural is present and it is obvious. There are people with magic and everybody knows it. There are monsters, there are creatures, there are things. I mean, you live in, when you live in a haunted landscape, I mean, it ceases to kind of be haunted and just becomes the way that things are. I mean, if you've ever played The Witcher 3,
Yeah.
one of the things that I really like about it is that you as the player, as Geralt, are running around this landscape where the world is full of challenges for you to overcome and get XP and do whatever, and all the poor fuckers in the villages that you talk to, who need you to kill monsters, are like, yeah, my Uncle Bob, he was out in the field the other day and there was a Zoogle in a ditch and a Zoogle ate him. And it's like, this is just a normal thing for them. Like, in the real world, we have heart attacks, or, people get, run over by a cart, or they have an allergic reaction to something. And in a fantasy landscape, occasionally they just get eaten by monsters.
Yeah.
It's just a thing that happens, a daily hazard.
Or fight
And
giant wasps for
yeah,
fun.
yeah, you live in a world with these things. I mean, there's a little bit, which is almost too cheeky, but I think it's too cute to leave out. So it's still in. There's a little bit in the Only Fools Fill Graves novella where Locke and Jean are talking about this very phenomenon, and Jean says something to the effect of, sometimes I get the impression that this world doesn't like us very much, which is, a meta commentary on what authors do to their characters. But, also I think, very true, which is that, in that novella and its sequels, Locke and Jean are spending a lot of time walking around the countryside. They're walking around in the dark. They're walking around on lonely roads. We've seen bits and pieces, like there are hints of awful things here and there in Red Seas Under Red Skies. I really, really like the device of, tossing little ghost stories and little asides, into the paths of the characters, or having people relate these things. There's a sequence in Only Fools Fill Graves where Locke and John basically sit down with a couple other people around a campfire, and they all tell ghost stories for a couple of pages. Because this world is absolutely full of them, and I think it must be really interesting to just, like, if you live in Carthage, like there's just places you don't go. All of the Theron cities that have Eldren structures, including Camor, like there's just places you don't go if you want to come back. And you just, like, you just have to deal with it. It's like, you don't walk into the reactor space of a nuclear power plant. You don't walk into an open volcano's caldera. You don't open that door or go down that alley, et cetera, because the world is haunted.
and you mentioned, I was just seeing today that you had 3 novellas planned that were in between books 3 and 4. And then you mentioned, and I forget the name of it, Only Fools.
Yeah, the first
That
one
one?
is called Only Fools Fill Graves.
Okay, and that one is available right now. Is
No, oh my God, Only Fools Fill Graves. What am I doing? The first one, I'm sorry, More Than Fools Fill Graves. I'm sorry,
More
my
Than
my my
Fools.
my brain was just fucking me over. I'm
I
sorry.
it was probably my influence because I started off saying Only Fools.
You can go back and edit that in with blah blah blah. Only fools, more than fools fill graves. Blah blah blah.
We got
No,
it.
I'm sorry. The title of the novella that I wrote and should know is More Than Fools Fill Graves. Duh. So yeah, that is the first one in the sequence. The second one is the Mad Baron's Mechanical Attic. The third one is the Choir of Knives.
And when are the other 2 going to be available?
That's a good question. I have to finish um the Mad Baron's Mechanical Attic, which is about 50% done. And I have nothing written in the Choir of Knives. I have a plot outline and nothing else. So I haven't even started that one yet.
Okay.
So I'm hoping at least some next year, being 2026. Maybe if I get my shit together, all of them. I don't know. I can't promise that.
Very cool.
Because they need to have, they'll because this is Subterranean Press. They will be getting nice presentations, and they'll have illustrations to line up and all of that. And that requires competent people to build a schedule around it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I've owed several novellas to Subterranean Press for an embarrassing length of time. And when they were originally conceived, they were going to be prequels to The Lies of Locke Lamora. And at some point, I had a sort of existential narrative crisis and realized that, like, I didn't have anything interesting to say. Like, I'm not against the concept of prequels. I just think that what a prequel really needs to do is reveal something that you didn't previously know, or cast something familiar in a new light. Do something other than just show more of the same thing happening. And so I just wasn't confident that there was anything really worth doing as a prequel. So the project kind of languished. And then I realized that there is a lengthy period of time between main novel 3 and main novel 4.
Mm.
So they are prequels to the Thorn of Emberlane, but they fit right into the modern chronology.
Okay.
That's fun.
And
We'll have to-
again, one thing I will always stress is that you don't need to read these to follow the events of the fourth novel. Ideally, it will just enhance things if you do, but if you miss it or skip it, I'm not really a big fan of books that become impenetrable if you don't read the side material. Like one of my major guilty pleasures over the years has been David Weber's Honor Harrington sequence. If any of you guys have ever read it.
They're good. I think I've only read 3 or 4 of them.
Okay. I've read all 548.
Yeah, there's so many.
No, there's like 18 or 19 in the main sequence, and the thing is, at a certain point, there are a couple of side trilogies, and I don't object to the existence of the side trilogies, co-written with other people. It's just that the events of those trilogies on the side become so integral to the plot of the main sequence books that, like, half of the main sequence books start to become kind of impenetrable to me.
Yeah.
And so I like, no, absolutely, no shade on David Weber or Baen Books or any of his co-authors. I just wanted a different approach for my own work. I just wanted really, really to try really, really hard to make sure that the main sequence of Gentleman Bastard novels is kind of is kind of complete in its own right. It can be added to, but you don't need anything on the side to figure out who's who and what's what.
Yeah, that was one of my complaints about some of the Cosmere stuff, where it starts to feel like you need to read 5 books to read the next book in the series. Or you're like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, and again, no shade on Brandon and no shade on people who
Yeah.
really enjoy that sort of thing, because I mean, there is a section of the readership out there that is like, oh boy, 36 books to decode and fit together, and the whole like red yarn on a board thing, building your crazy conspiracy theories and tying it all together. I mean, that's a real pleasure for some people. But I'm not entirely in that zone. I mean, again, harkening back to the mystery. I mean, I still come from what I think of as the land of sword and sorcery, the land of weird fiction. And I think of the writings of some of my like my favorite writers, Fritz Leiber, Robert E. Howard, etc. Like, there are always gaps. There's Fritz Leiber in particular. Leiber is a gigantic influence on my work in general, and on the Locke Lamora books in specific. And those are not stories that were built to be strung together into a coherent picture. And I mean, hell, neither were the Conan stories of Robert E. Howard. I mean, very famously, very essentially, Howard himself described those stories as, these are not meant to be a strict chronology. These are meant to be campfire tales that this one guy is basically telling, years and years after this stuff has happened in his life. So if some things don't hang together or add up, like, that is a feature, not a bug. So yeah, I try to keep things as compartmentalized as I can.
Kind of reminds me of like so what you were just saying about Fritz Leiber, kind of like a James Bond type thing. Like the James Bond world, to me, it's not necessarily all chronological. It's, sure, it's the same person, but he's doing all these things, and they don't all have to like tie up and go, oh, well, when did he do this? Or when did he go there?
Hmm.
Um, just, you know, stories about this fictional, amazing, superhuman type person, right? Supernatural, superhuman,
Yeah, it's
extraordinary.
like if you really insist on firm chronology and how it all fits together, I mean it can't. The original figure of James Bond, I mean, would have been born in 1918. I mean, he was meant to be in his mid 30s in the early 1950s. Even like the Roger Moore version, or the guy that is talked about in the role playing game from the 80s, was born in 1928. So it's like, on the one hand, if you try to string all this together, a universe in which Doctor No and Skyfall happen to the same guy. This guy's 125 fucking years old. It just doesn't work. So you just kind of, you have to do the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing. Just admit to yourself it's just a show. I should really just relax and think of it as like, these are tall tales from MI6. There's a guy who's a legend, and maybe it's not even the same guy.
Yeah, that was one theory I heard before too. It's just like a mantle, like 007 is a mantle, so it's not supposed to, like, whoever a man is at that in that decade or whatever, he became James Bond. That wasn't his given name. It was just, all right, yes, he takes up the mantle and continues the extraordinary tale, and so
Mhm. Yeah, that's a fun approach. That's something that you could, that a writer who didn't have a million other fucking things to do could have a lot of fun with.
yeah. Justin, you have a question?
Yeah. So in book two, I really loved all the sailing and pirate things. I thought it was written really well. I'm just curious if you've ever thought about returning to the open seas, like a short story or anything like that.
Absolutely. The answer is absolutely. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm from Minnesota. I'm a kid from a landlocked state, so naturally I have all the deep fascination with the ocean and all the things in it. For whatever reason, when I was in my early 20s, I kind of fell madly in love with the Horatio Hornblower novels of C.S. Forester, and a lot of his other fiction, which frequently has nautical themes. He was also the author of the book that became the movie Greyhound a couple of years ago. And then from I did what happens to a lot of people who get into Hornblower, which is I moved on to the Aubrey Maturin sequence by Patrick O'Brien, which became the movie Master and Commander.
Hmm.
So I just, my head was absolutely stuffed with all kinds of nautical stuff, and I always wanted to put it into the novels at various points. And we are going to see more ships. We are going to see more of some of the characters that we saw in Red Seas, and we are there's a lot more coming from the sea.
I know
In the
one that has to make an appearance. Um, her
That
her her storyline was kind of left open-ended, so we'll see
I
who she was
I
working with.
okay, yes. But I think without spoiling, I can say two things, which is that the story of that woman is continued and continues in Thorn of Emberlane. You're going to find out a bit more about what was actually going on there. The other thing is that I discovered while writing Red Seas that Zamira Drakasha was basically the most fun I'd ever had writing a character.
she's the coolest.
Yeah, she was
Um,
really cool. Like,
it would be insane not to bring her back into the sequence at some point. So that has been meant to happen for years now.
Yeah, I think I told Brandon when we were reading, I'm like, I could totally do a prequel story with her as the main character because she's awesome.
or a side story.
Or a
Be
side story.
careful. Be careful what you wish for. Let's just say that.
All right, well, she's dead.
She was dead long before.
Uh, uh, Speaking of this book too, did you ever consider having Esri survive?
Ooh, boy, that's an interesting question because I can't remember if I did. I toyed with the idea, and I mean, Locke and John are both kind of staring at it as what if we come out of this and we're a trio again? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to rectify this? Because Esri has her own life and wants to, really wants to. Esri's very committed to her piracy career. I'm not entirely sure she wants to relocate. But love finds a way, and who knows what might have happened. I honestly think that I might not have thoroughly gamed out a scenario in which Esri survived the book. I If I were doing it these days, I think I would give it a longer, harder think than I did back in 2006, 2007 when I was writing Red Seas. Um, but 99% chance that she was not gonna make it, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, because I was reading and I was like, there's another death flag. At a certain point, there's so many death flags. I was like, maybe she's gonna live. Nope, she burns.
And I do enjoy being that bastard who will absolutely, you do the things that indicate, to the audience that, oh yeah, this character is absolutely going to die, and then it doesn't happen, and then someone dies of something completely random. They get run over by a dog cart in the street. Um, you know the. One of the things that has happened, with the benefit of time and with the benefit of the one net benefit to having taken so long with Thorn of Emberlane for various reasons is that every iteration of it has been a better book than the one that was previously conceived. I mean, in much the same way that like I went through a divorce in the middle of writing the Republic of Thieves, and that sucked. But I came out the other side a much happier person, and the book came out the other side a much more mature piece of work. Because I don't think I would still be uh, as proud of that book if it were written from the perspective that I had on it circa 2007, 2008. Yeah, like the silver lining to getting your ass kicked by life is that it gives you added perspective and nuance and subtlety and all of that bullshit that you can then vampirize to make your work more emotionally mature. So if you just get your ass kicked long enough, you will be the greatest artist in human history. Um, but no, if part of the gradual like my sense of where the series is going, my holistic notions of what it's about and what arguments are being made and what the characters in the books are arguing about is that I think I've gotten a much firmer grasp of what I want to poke at in terms of Locke's psychology, Locke's approach to life, and Locke's weaknesses, and what the people around him are critiquing him about in terms of like good decisions, bad decisions, why are you like this? Why do you do this? One thing that I could have done if I'd had a more mature perspective is tie the uh, romance with Esri and the loss of Esri a little more tightly into the whole ongoing question of, what is Locke's fundamental problem? Why can't he have nice things? Why does he screw everything up for the people around him? Why do they stick by him when he does this? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's just it's one of those things where it's like, Red Seas was my second novel, and ideally, as you write more of these things and you look at more of these long structures, you do gradually evolve more of an ability to kind of decide, what your overall picture is going to be, what you want to interrogate, where you want to go deeper into the psychology of the characters. So yeah, I mean, she was almost certainly still going to die, but I think there may have been things that I would have wanted to put on the page, or have explored a little bit more if I'd had a slightly better idea of what I was doing.
So you kind of mentioned it, and I have to say, each book that you has come out I've noticed that you've really found your writing style, your voice more, and like they've been progressively better. Like the writing has been better on each one of those. And you mentioned, I think you mentioned that, if I understood you correctly, that you kind of found your footing with each new installment. Um, but I had another question. That was more of just a comment. Another
Well,
question
thank
about
you. That's very nice of you to say.
book
And
two.
I hope that's the case.
Yes, it came across. I think Justin agrees with me as well. Uh,
Yeah, I think my favorite is still book one, just for it, it's new and the crazy stuff that happens at the end of it
Mhm.
and stuff, but they're all really good.
I mean, it's really difficult to get over the emotional impact of a surprise. I mean, that's the thing is that the
Yeah.
first book from anybody out of the blue is always going to be the one that takes you by surprise. And there are a number of writers that I absolutely love where I even though I admit to myself that like wow, they got a lot better as an artist as time went by, even if they continued to produce excellent stuff, like you will always have an affection for the early work, the one that just kind of blasted its way into your consciousness.
Yeah, I also think Comore is my favorite city, and I hope we go back to it sometime
Oh,
because
indeed.
it's freaking awesome
Oh,
with all
indeed.
the.
Because I mean, it doesn't happen in Thorn of Emberlane. There's no Camorra scenes and there are no flashbacks. So in my workspace, in my head, I have not been in Camorra for some time. So writing the short story for Grimdark magazine, Locke and the Bottled Serpent, which were I had a pretty profound emotional response to going back to Camorra. Like it really, really felt like coming home. And I got that from a bunch of people who read the story, and it's like what I didn't realize as I was handing it into the editors that I had missed being out of the place for as long as my readers had. But believe me, I feel it.
so I have a question about book two. The scene where Utgar meets with forgot his character's name.
Does he meet with Rodanov
Uh,
or
yes, whenever Rodanov tells him that he wants him to watch Drakasha, um, did you ever consider not having, because that subsection it read as, and I was take when I read books for the podcast, I take notes as I'm going through. And like one of the first things I wrote was because the first few paragraphs, it wasn't until the last paragraph that you revealed who this person that Rodinov was talking to was. And so I wrote down, look out for who this person is. And then when I got to the end of the subsection, I was like, oh, well, it's him. Did you ever consider having it a surprise that who that person was and let the readers kind of try to solve who the spy is on Drakasha's ship?
I mean, that's not a bad thought. It's not a bad thought at all. I mean, I certainly could have concealed the spy and then, dropped some hints and had a lot of fun. And, I mean, that in and of itself, would have resulted in, hopefully a big shock at the end of it. You kind of have to make a choice as a writer when you are constructing this sort of thing. You can't have both. You can have the tension of a known antagonist, or you can have the surprise of the identity reveal. But you kind of have to pick one and go for it. And I think at that point what I really wanted, which is interesting to me, thinking back, Jesus, it's been 18 years now, 18 going on 19 years. Because the end of Red Seas to me, I mean, parts of it are a little bit too rushed, and some of it is that I had a very very firm word limit that I did not necessarily have in with Lies and with Republic, because Lies was the first book, and Lies is not as long as its sibling books. But with Red Seas is the one where my editors, kind of said, okay, we're going to teach this kid how to fit into a space. So I had to hit 200,000 words. No more. 200,001, we start cutting. So I had to cut 2 chapters that I was fairly fond of that I may, eventually do something with. Um, uh, one of them was more stuff on the sea, and one of them was basically a bigger glimpse of Port Prodigal. There were twin brother sister priests preaching, and just a whole lot of local color, and people being piratical and drunken gutters and so on and so forth. And neither of them was really essential, so they had to go. But one of the other artifacts of that is that I think that I could have done a better job of giving the reader an earlier idea of how the government of Talvarar functioned, so that the loopholes that Locke and John sort of exploit and the allies that they sort of use to affect the grand climax come a bit less out of left field. I think that is, for me, probably the sloppiest element of Red Seas is that I think that there needs to be an element of fair play for heist and trickery narratives, and I think that I should have hung just a little bit more evidence of what was actually going to happen on the walls before it happened. Um, so it's interesting to me that I was thinking with Utgar very much in terms of setting up tension for the readers rather than a surprise, when the ending of the book itself contains a big surprise that didn't have as much tension. Um, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with
Uh,
that. That's
I
sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously deliberately made a decision, but also think that maybe I could have thought about the grand climax a little bit more in terms of those decisions. But again, I mean, it was a second novel.
Yeah.
Second novels are often difficult, and I wrote it relatively fast, and with the careless energy of youth rather than the disciplined treachery of middle age.
There you go.
But yeah, no, I mean, if I were to go back and rewrite it now, I would certainly contemplate the fun of having the traitor be a question mark rather than a person. I think at the time I did not necessarily realize that that might have been a viable option. So,
Yeah.
Well, thanks for answering that question.
I mean, yeah, I mean, so sometimes the answer really is just like, oh gosh, I didn't see that, or wow, I'm a dumbass, or
Yeah. I mean, it worked out in some other ways because then you get to see him interacting with the people, and he's a traitor, and you're like get tension that way too. So
Yeah, there was
yeah,
a
I
point
really
where Drakasha was like assigning people to certain people, and I was like, "Oh, Utgar's going over there. What's going to happen there?"
Yeah, what I really wanted was, I wanted the pirates, and just like the whole this entire lifestyle, all these people gathered around Port Prodigal. It's what tends to happen in any genuinely piratical setting, which is that you have a bunch of people who are unified by the fact that the world is against them and they're against the world, but within that structure, there's an awful lot of backstabbing and petty jealousy and arguments, and just a constant scrabbling over one another for the scraps of whatever's available. So I wanted it to have that swashbuckling, "Arr, we are free upon the waves," but also to have it sort of weighted down. I mean, which is one of the themes that comes in all the other books as well. The whole purpose of what Father Chains is doing to his kids, as he explains it to Locke, is you are surrounded by cutthroats and treachery your entire fucking life. I'm not trying to make you loyal to one another because it'll make you good people, because we are meek and gentle. It's because loyalty is a weapon in a world where nobody else has it. And so that's one of those themes that gets revisited in small ways and large ways in every book in the sequence. And the pirates of Port Prodigal are just a part of that picture as well. Sorry if I'm babbling on tangents here.
No, this is great. This is a great conversation. Do you have another question, Justin?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I really love the audiobook narrator, Michael
Oh,
Page.
Michael Page, he's amazing.
Yeah. Did you have a hand in picking him, or was it just your publisher?
I didn't choose him. I didn't know he existed. My publishers and or somebody at Tantor Media, I think, because they did the first sequence of audiobooks, would have chosen him for obvious reasons, as it
Yeah, he's
turns out.
great.
But no, I greatly appreciate him, but I did not quote unquote hire him. I'm just the beneficiary of how good he is at that. And he has actually he's I mean, if you've enjoyed listening to him, he has actually recorded all of those books twice, not just once. Because he did the original Tantor Media productions back in 2006, 2007, 2013. A couple years ago, we did sort of a right switcheroo to Random House wanted to sort of run its own audio productions, and I mean, Tantor had been very successful for 15 plus years. It was it was all between the bosses, and they were not content with the audio quality of the old masters. So they brought poor Michael Page in again, and they had him re-record every fucking thing. So he has done them twice.
Uh, that's great.
But he's also, I mean, he's very conscientious. He's very careful. I get emails from him about pronunciation and so on and so forth. So, 99% of the time, if you hear him say something in one of his recordings, that is how I pronounce it in my own head.
Yeah, it was very helpful because the Komori's Spanish or Italian-ish.
Yes.
So
I mean, Theron culture itself, I mean, Camorra is very Italianate, but
yeah,
Theron culture in general, I mean, it's a broad conglomeration of, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, Mediterranean, North Africa. I mean, it's all of these things mushed together. It's the whole Mediterranean.
And High
Um,
Theron is German, isn't it?
well, the if you go far enough north and reach the Vadrans, I mean, the Vadrans are, you can characterize them as fantasy Vikings or post Vikings. But the Vadrans have three tribes within them that loosely correlate to fantasy Vikings, fantasy Germans, fantasy Russians, or
Okay.
Eastern Europeans of some sort. So all of the northerly fantasy stereotypes get folded into them, and all of the southerly fantasy stereotypes get folded into the Therans.
Um, so I have a couple of questions about the world itself.
Sure.
One is there a collective name for the whole world? I've heard you saying Theron. Is that just the continent that we're on, or is the world itself have a?
I had a good long think about this back in the day, and for better or for worse, I'm not sure I'm ever going to give the planet a name. Because I mean, when you think about what we're actually reading here, I mean, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, no one on Locke's world speaks English. I mean, we are reading a translated document somehow of people who live on a completely different planet, and however that works is an exercise for the individual reader. Um, so when they say the world, you can assume that in their own language they're saying Zorbap or whatever their word for the world is. It's not actually Zorbap, but it's like that thing where
That's canon
if you
now.
you read if you read the appendices to Return of the King, and you discover that the actual names of the hobbits are not Frodo, Bilbo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, et cetera, et cetera. Tolkien gives their original proper names in their original proper language, which he has translated and sort of anglicized for the benefit of the reader. But I mean, I forget off the top of my head what it were, but like their names are Frozap, Borzap, and like a completely different linguistic treatment. And so he plays that whole game of like, he did that in his notes at various points. He's like, I found this book in an attic, and I translated the translation that was already in progress. But if you go back into the reality of it, like there was no Bilbo, there was no Frodo. Those are just how we think of those people. They called themselves something else. So the real name of Locke's world, I think, is going to be just hidden forever. And there's a point, ideally later in the series, where a bunch of people, for various reasons, are going to have an argument about what they call the world, because there are, various cultures that we have heard of, and some cultures that we have not heard of or met yet. There are people out there beyond the horizons, and they have their own words for things, and they're going to get into arguments with the Therans and the Vadrans and the Seresti and so on and so forth. Um, but the other thing is from the very beginning, I wrote The Lies of Locke Lamora and realized that I had not come up with a name for the planet. And my theory of operation there is that I just think of the place as Locke's world, because we are getting one relatively limited story, where we're peeking through the eyes of one little group of people. Um, and I wanted that terminology. I thought that just calling it Locke's World sort of emphasizes the fact that this is hopefully a very humanistically framed fantasy novel. The point of it is not to build a Cosmere. The point of it is not to, give you a solar system and a galaxy and describe where everything fits. It's just to we are peeking through a keyhole at hopefully a very deep, rich, elaborate world, but we're only ever going to see a part of it. And I thought that not naming the planet was something of an assistance to that aesthetic note. But people are always people may say things about it, but I'm reasonably confident that I'm never going to retcon it at any given point and say, oh, by the way, the planet is named Lorbap or whatever.
Okay, so given that, I think I can guess the answer to the other question I had, which is which came first, Locke and John or the world they live in, like in your mind. And so I
you
think
know
it's Locke and John.
Well, they see the ideas for both sort of evolved contemporaneously, and then I kind of merged them, because I kind of had this notion of a world that I wanted to write, and I kind of had this notion of a character that I wanted to write about. And after noodling with both of them, it's like, wait a minute, I can just smush these together, and it wound up working out pretty well. Um, because Locke was, I had this notion when I was starting to get more and more serious about actually writing a novel. I mean, I've been dreaming of it, since high school. But it was really around 2000. I was 22. That's when I started, like, the process of really, really getting down to it and studying and planning and so on and so forth. Um, and that kind of ended the daydreaming phase and got into the actual world building phase. And just the whole notion of, what if there was a con artist? And that was where Locke came from. I played him as a character in a Star Wars role playing game for a couple sessions back in 2000. That was the D20 Star Wars. That's how old I am. Rather, I mean, we played a lot of the West End games D6 Star Wars as well, because I'm also that old. But no, I had this character who was a Force adept, who was the whole idea behind him was that he was basically a secret agent, not a James Bond type secret agent, but ideally you'll never see him secret agent, who his whole job was to go out into the universe on behalf of this one out of the way planet that had survived all kinds of galactic disasters by just kind of not getting noticed, and making sure that they continued to not get noticed. They had this they called them royal provocateurs or something, whatever, I can't remember in my notes. But the whole idea was basically just, we don't have an army. We're not a rich planet. We just have a couple of specialists who kind of go out there and just make sure that nobody wants to pay attention to us. Nobody hears of us. We get erased from the tax records. We avoid major battles. The flow of galactic politics and history just kind of gets diverted around us. And I didn't really get to live out that vision of this character's life in the game, but I became very attached to the character. So, I threw him on the dissection table and, took some bits out and added some bits, and he became Locke Lamora. And at the same time, I was dicking around with this fantasy world that I wanted to mess about with, and the two just smushed together really nicely.
I love that you brought that up because I'm guilty of it, and I know a whole lot of other people do, where they read books and they're like, "Oh, that's a cool character concept to play," and then they play that character in a role-playing game. Whereas you probably may, oh, I mean, Gary Gygax, I know, Erickson, uh,
Oh, Steven Erickson?
yeah, uh, Malazan Books of the Fallen Author.
Yeah.
Um, his books are written based off of characters he played. Um, uh, and here you have written books based off of characters you played. So it's fun to see that reversal in that kind of process. So like I've played I played a barbarian in 5e that was based off of Dalinar Kholin,
Oh, okay. From
loosely.
Way of
Yeah.
Kings. Yeah.
Yep.
I've also played up in one game that Justin DM'd, was, I think it was Dungeon World. I played a character that was based off of a merging of like two or three characters from Brian Staveley's Unhewn Throne,
Oh, okay.
which I want to finish that series. I read the first book and I thought it was great. So I need to finish that series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's fun to do. So I have.
I did go. Speaking of world building, just a lot of steampunkish worlds that I've read and seen. There typically are firearms, guns, and blunderbusses and stuff. I was just curious why you chose not to have guns.
Um, and I don't want to say that there will never be guns, because Locke's world is in the last century or so before firearms are going to start being a real thing. And a lot of it has to do with just the nature of scholarship and alchemy in Locke's world, which is that, on the one hand, there's real magic, which real magicians do. And then there's alchemy, which is an occasionally magical process that, like alchemists, there's really nothing special about them other than they're willing to study alchemy. In the same way that, like, technically anybody can go get a PhD in astrophysics, but some people are going to be a lot better at it than others. Some people are able to devote their entire lives to this and make great discoveries, and for some people it would just be a waste of time because they don't have what it takes. So alchemy is a magical process that a lot of people can access, but what Locke's world does not have is that there's no burgeoning we haven't had a renaissance yet. There's no burgeoning scientific movement. There's no sharing. Every alchemist, more or less, that once upon a time, the Theron Collegium during the Theron Throne era, there might have been a more proactive social, scholarship network around the continent, but not in these days. In these days, it's still very much every person for themselves. Alchemists guard their secrets jealously, and they only teach their apprentices, or family members. And there's no real open sharing of information. So you have things like, and part of this is a world building way for me to kind of control the ludicrousness of some of the things that are on offer. Red Seas was very educational in this respect. because there are some very powerful bits of alchemy on display in Red Seas, like shipbane spheres or Whitfrost. And so, I mean, the question becomes, if you have an alchemical substance that you can dab on the end of a dagger and instantly paralyze somebody, why wouldn't you just do this all the time? Why would you use anything else? And so the answer is that only a limited number of people know how to make this stuff. It's horrendously expensive, and it's not a widely known skill or substance. And with shipbane spheres, A, they're also very expensive. B, as you can see, they're an insane thing to take onto a wooden ship. They're
Yeah.
it's like, yes, chemical warfare in a medieval period would be very, very effective, but if you have no ability to protect yourself from it, you're a lunatic to apply it against other people. It's just, I mean, the risk is just too friggin' great. There's even after we developed firearms and gunpowder, I mean, the history of using fire, the history of heating shot in naval warfare is centuries of disaster after disaster. Well into the 20th and 21st centuries. It's still something that we have not entirely mastered and made foolproof. So part of it is just that Locke's world is so fragmented, it's so competitive. And if the people within it were more cooperative, I'm pretty sure that by now they would have figured some things out. But I'm not averse to the notion of sort of advancing the timeline, because you've probably noticed, if you've read all three books, that there is some folding and spindling and mutilating of our own history. That, like, the Theron people, I mean, some of their technology is very obviously 17th or 18th century rather than high medieval or early Renaissance. So it's not an analog of our world. There's some stuff that is more advanced. There is stuff that is less advanced compared to, like, Elizabethan England. But I thought about it, and I just don't think it's quite gonna happen. In Locke's lifetime, we will see how I feel about that as the series progresses.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those. I didn't notice in the first and third book, but in Red Skies, I'm like, oh yeah, they don't have cannons on Tracaster's ship. They have
Yeah, no,
ballistas
and
and stuff.
I mean, it's such a game changer for naval warfare in general, because I mean, really, pre-gunpowder naval warfare really isn't just cannons without the cannons. It isn't really just, oh, we've got 40 catapults on a ship rather than, 40, smoothbore cannons. I mean, it really is a completely distinct art and craft. And and that offers a lot of interesting possibilities, but it also offers a lot of real challenges, because you can't just write Napoleonic Age of Sail fiction in which everybody has spears and scorpions rather than cannons and muskets.
Instead, everybody has carnivorous birds.
Yeah, keep a dinosaur or two on deck, and really go for it.
Those things were
Um,
gnarly.
Thank you, thank you. I do enjoy writing creatures that eat people, believe it or not.
Yeah, you have a lot of them. They're all
I
cool.
I wrote a note about that. I said you like to create unique creatures: stiletto wasps, death lanterns, falconas. Um, I do have another question and comment. Uh, you're really good at writing some extremely like humorous scenes. Um, the one that sticks in my mind the most is in book one, when they're climbing out of the tower, and they're climbing down, and then
Oh yeah, yeah.
the cheating guy that was climbing out, and they're like, "What are you doing in here?" And then the whole scene, that was just absolutely hilarious. And then the cliffside in book two, whenever the thief up there, which I thought was going to
Yes.
come back. I thought he was going to come back. I thought that Locke and Jean were being honest and like, hey, you owe us a favor. We're going to come back and collect on it. But it seems like they were just doing that to make him like think about his future. Maybe he'll come back.
Well,
Um,
I mean, the guy does owe them a favor. It's, you know, it's a question as to whether they're going to be able to find him and ever reasonably collect on it. It's like, yeah, there's a, you know, there's a guy in Skokie, Illinois, who owes me a favor. You know, if assuming I'm ever in his neighborhood ever again, and he can be useful to me. You know, it's like I'll keep that in my back pocket.
and then the other thing, counter to the humorous, is you're also really good at writing creepy horror scenes. Uh, the one that comes to mind the most is the night market with the Bonds Magi
I
in
had a lot
book
of fun with
two,
that.
which, like, you start to see Locke is like, did that just happen? That John, did you see that? And then it is just like all of a sudden right there. Which of those do you prefer writing? I mean, we already know from the beginning of the podcast that you really love horror. Do you prefer to write the horror? Do you prefer to write humor, or somewhere in between?
Oh man, this is really you know, which of your children is your favorite sort of question. You know, and it's, you know, I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm not yet you know, I can't honestly say that I'm a full horror writer, although I mean, I would like to write some stuff that is overtly openly horror sooner rather than later. But you know, you can see hints in the Gentleman Bastard sequence of, you know, little bits that I think kind of reflect my horror sensibilities. You know, that night market scene, the parlor passage scene, you know, the hints of what might be going on in Carthane, et cetera, et cetera. And I generally think that, you know, epic fantasy and little bits and pieces of horror are two great tastes that taste really great together. I mean, one of the most formative influences on me was Ray Feist. Um, and there are, especially in the very first Rift War saga, there are sections of those books that are just kind of openly, you know, creepy ooga booga horror. And I think they work so very well. I really enjoy the entire process of what you might call tonal variation, which is, you know, you give the reader a sensation of, you know, grief or horror or loss or whatever, and then you alleviate it. You give them some catharsis, or you go the opposite direction. You know, you give them some catharsis, and then you smash them with a hammer. I think it's you know, it's really important. And I mean, this is a really educational way to look at like the work of George R. R. Martin, another you know, another extremely formative influence on me. George gets, I think, unfairly tarred as, you know, a writer of nothing but misery and bloodshed. And I think George has received a lot of unfair criticism where people are confusing the stuff that he actually wrote in the Song of Ice and Fire books with the stuff that was happening during the less successful seasons of the TV series. Because you know, I loved that series in general. You know, I watched it, you know, beginning to end, all 8 seasons, and there really is a point, you know, season 5, 6, 7 leading into 8, where there are lengthy periods where nothing much is happening except torture porn and misery. And that is not the books. There are miserable, awful things happening, but George varies the emotional tone. He also, you know, leavens things with his mystery is leavened with humor. His murder is leavened with humor. His discomfort is leavened with comfort. You know, I think you'll find that, you know, he is a much more variable and nuanced writer than his reputation has, you know, unfairly become. And you don't want to slip, and you know, as far as I'm concerned, into that one note state of, you know, this book will be nothing but unrelenting misery, or this book will be nothing but unrelieved whimsy. I think that you know, the highs feel higher and the lows feel lower if there is that variation, if there is that interweaving of emotional notes. So it is more difficult for me to construct horror because I can't do it with the facility that I can construct more humorous pieces. And I think that's just me being honest, but also like just me in general. Like if I'm hanging out with people, I love making people laugh. It is one of my overriding goals at all times. I mean, I've known for many years now that like listening to people laugh at something that I read or something that I've said is like dangerously rewarding to me. You know, it is absolutely my gerbil pellet for which I will, you know, go back to the pellet dispenser. You know, I rarely sit around and try to creep people out or construct horrifying experiences for them. So you know, I'm just I know what I like when it comes to horror, when it comes to eeriness. I just don't think that I am yet as adept at constructing it as I hope to eventually be. And so I would say for the time being that writing humor is a lot easier. Um, but the again, I mean, the whole point of the lengthy spiel, my 27-minute answer to your question there was that I do think that, you know, both sides of that coin are equally important. You know, it's like you know, contrasting texture in you know, a gourmet dish. You know, or you know, contrasting colors in a beautiful painting. You know, you set everything into the context of what is around it, and you enrich everything through contrast.
Yeah, I like that you bring up George R. R. Martin and his tonal variation. I think I mean I'm a big Brandon Sanderson fan, and I think he does great with his tonal variation as well. Um, if you've read much of it, like his character Hoyd tends to be that kind of like in serious situations, he comes in with some crazy like you know making fun of people when there's like political like tension going on, and he's just making fun of everybody, and
Mhm.
um, just kind of breaks it up, and he does. I think he does a really good job of that as well.
Yeah, and Brandon is also pretty good, based on I mean, I haven't read the entire Cosmere. But based on what I have read, he's also really good at kind of keeping things contextualized and in character, because there's the difference between, you know, the humor that arises naturally out of the situation or from characters talking about other characters, as opposed to somebody like looking at the audience and going wink wink. Because you know, the one of them is a very enriching and fulfilling experience, and one of them undercuts, you know, the integrity of the whole fantasy. And so he is really good at that. I mean, Hoyd himself is you know, meant to be, I mean, meant to be a commentator, meant to be a jester, meant to, you know, take the wind out of the characters around him when things get a little bit serious and heavy. Which is, I mean, and that's a very delicate thing to do, because that's an easy character to just completely fuck up and drive the reader insane. So you
He
know,
drives me insane.
I understand that not everybody is a Hoyt fan, but also, like, you know, I mean, Shakespeare's fools. You know, I get very tired of Shakespeare's fools from time to time, even though occasionally they are allowed to say remarkably insightful things. They can still be an awful lot to fucking deal with. One of the books that was very formative for the Republic of Thieves is a book called The Year of the King, which is an autobiographical. It's literally a year of diaries from an actor named Anthony Sher, the late Anthony Sher, Sher. And it's basically it's everything that was going on in his life and his thoughts the year that he played Richard III for the Royal Shakespeare Company. How he prepared, you know, how he got into that space mentally, how he tried to develop the character. And there's an awful lot there about, you know, how he feels about Shakespeare in general, because he was obviously doing other Shakespearean things before that. And one of the things that he writes in his diaries is, Christ, Shakespeare's fools are tedious. You know, as a guy who played three or four of them on stage, you know, to much applause over the course of his career. Um, so yeah, you know, there's a definite art and science to deploying that sort of character, so that you kind of get it just right and try not to drive your audience mad. You know, and every reader is going to have their own limits. You know, the Hoyd zone is different for everybody.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people like Brandon likes Hoyt a lot, and I'm just always like, oh, why is he here? I hate him.
Why the hell haven't you been killed yet? Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I do understand.
Do you have any more questions, Justin?
Just one last one. Even being a DM, it's so hard to come up with names. I'm just wondering, having to come up with all the names, what's your process? That seems ridiculous.
Well, okay, well, it's multifaceted. I mean, I do every now and then, like, a random name or something will pop into my head. I write everything down. I try to be really, really good about writing everything down. I've not always been. I was much, much worse at it earlier in my career, and these days, I mean, I try to keep a notebook with me at all times. I have entire note files that are just that. I refer to them as like noun graveyards or dumping grounds. I'm a lot less shy than I was at the beginning of just dumping everything. Everything goes into a note. Everything goes into a book, because I've shed myself of the delusion that don't worry, I'm definitely going to remember this. I've lost so many, and I'm sure that every writer out there can tell you that oh God, I have lost so many meaningful and useful and good ideas by telling myself, I'll definitely remember this. Right before bed is also a really, or waking up in the middle of the night. Telling yourself, oh, this idea is so good, I will definitely remember this in the morning. No, you never will. You will. Oh, it always goes away, and you are left only with the hollow sensation that you had a really good idea, haunting you forever now. And it's like, oh man, what the fuck was it? So I've gotten so much better about just, I go straight to the paper or straight to the note file. And I'm like, do not trust the gray matter. The gray matter is not to be trusted. You won't fucking remember it. And the sooner you develop the habit of just backstopping yourself, the happier you will be as a writer, if that's your thing. Um, so I write everything down. I sift through things, and the other thing, I mean, this is gonna sound, I don't know what this is gonna sound like, but I have discovered throughout my career that it is very possible to spend 6 hours going. I need a name for something. I need to name this guy. I will name him, credenza or whatever. And so you pat yourself on the head for what an original brilliant name you've come up with. And then you look at the phone book for the city of Zagreb in Croatia, and you're like, huh, there are 4,000 guys with that name in this phone book. I've just reinvented the Serbian or the Siberian or the Japanese version of Bob. At a certain point, I bookmarked online. I have Turkish phone directories, and I have Czechoslovakian phone directories, and lists of thousands of archaic names. And sometimes when I need a name, I will just kind of go name surfing. Or I will glance through them and say, yeah, I kind of like that, but I would like it better if it ended in Aussie rather than Anno, so on and so forth. There's a fine tradition in fantasy, I think, of sort of kind of folding and mutilating real world names so that you get like the Star Wars universe. You have people named Luke and Ben and Tim, but you also have people named Kylo and Zan and Boba. It's and there are cities on Earth where there are 4,000 people in the phone book named Boba. So there's a rich body of human linguistics out there waiting to be pilfered. And sometimes you're better off just randomly flipping through it rather than sweating your brain for 8 hours to come up with gonk.
Fair enough. That's kind of what I do. I use a fantasy name generator. I'm like, maybe it ends with a different letter.
Yep.
That sounds cool. Because yeah. Ugh.
But one of my D&D characters, the name came from the last name of somebody that worked at a company I worked for. I was just like, oh, that's cool, last name. I'll make it my first name of my character.
Yeah, one of the pirate captains in Red Seas is based on, or the name is based on like the only good manager I had back when I was waiting tables. Like he makes a brief appearance. Oh, and there's a pirate captain who is named after the guy who used to do hazmat operations briefings back when I was a firefighter. Just because he had a really unlikely and cool last name. So I stole it and put it in there. So yeah, theft, pilfering. That's where good art comes from.
Hell yeah. Very Locke, Gentlemen Bastards too.
Yeah. All right. I have one final question.
All right.
And it's a big one. Do you have any, are you able to give us a small reading of something that has not been published yet?
Give me a sec to pull up a file.
Okay. This has been a great conversation so far. Very thankful and fortunate to have you on.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that you guys have obviously, paid attention to what's actually in the books, which is always nice. I mean, I don't have a lot of podcasts where people are completely ignorant, but it's always pleasant to have someone say, yeah, remember this thing that actually happened in a book? You're like, oh, they read it, they remembered it, thank God. Okay, pulling up Microsoft Word, which is a resource hog that sorry, I didn't have a manuscript open before I started. Something that hasn't been published. All right.
I do like that you, when you signed my copy of Republic of Thieves at CoastCon, you wrote in, read the second book first, hopefully. And then your annotation in the first book, because I didn't have the bookstore didn't have book 2, so I have a signed copy of book 1 and book 3. But the book 1 says, because I hadn't read it fully at that time, but you said hopefully it doesn't suck. I was like, it doesn't. I can
Yeah,
honestly tell you right now it doesn't.
I often get that from people, bless them, will come to signings or whatever, or they'll I'll meet them at conventions, or they'll be like, well, I've never read this, but I'd like you to sign it. And so there's really the only thing I can say is, geez, I hope you still like this at the end of the book. I hope you think I'm a nice guy, even if the book sucks.
I don't know if you heard the question, Justin, but I asked him if he can give us a reading of something that hasn't been published.
Oh, yeah, now I had to go pee. Damn water, chugging water.
Yeah, water makes you do that. There's an abundance of water on Lockland, though.
True.
Yeah, I love that Ranland is just kind of a fanish, like it's a term of fanish affection, and like every time someone assumes like what the planet is actually called Randland, what the fuck was wrong with Robert Jordan? It's like no it isn't. Good lord.
It's not, but it is.
This is very yeah. Well, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like at this point, it's like I like I said, I had a distinct aesthetic notion of what I was doing by not naming the world. And at this point, I just can't help but feel that 19 years later, me retconning a name into the world would just it would just be inelegant, and just like it would feel wrong. I mean, like if I were to wake up, one day and like I've been visited by an angel of the Lord while I slept who said, Locke's world is named such and such, and it was perfect. Well, okay, then I wouldn't argue with that. But I sincerely doubt that is going to happen. Like,
that would be great.
It has failed. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if books just kind of happen that way? Like, thank you, God. I don't even have to plot this one. No, that has not happened in the last 19 years. I don't think it's going to start happening soon. Okay. All right. I will give you a little bit from More Than Fools Fill Graves, which is after Locke and John have left the city of Carthage in their usual, well-ordered and highly successful fashion. Past the suburbs, the walk wasn't easy at first, with the moons and the stars intermittently obscured. Faint glimmers of golden white marked towns in the far distance, but even in tame lands such as these, there was no free light, no well-maintained lampposts for anyone fool enough to be abroad. If you turned an ankle in a ditch, it was your own matter and not Carthane's. Hours passed, and the world paled into semi-visibility. Darkness became an orange haze, and finally a wan morning crowned with low banks of bruise-colored clouds. Into the sunrise they walked, avoiding any road that forked left. The city was lost from sight, folded miles away behind turnings and terraced valleys. The Carthani outlands were brown farming country, thick-seated with hamlets, and things had changed since they had passed through the area just a few weeks earlier. The charcoal burners were out tending their kilns, scenting and graying the air. The gleaners in the fields bore knives and hatchets in their belts, perhaps more prominently displayed than strictly necessary, and they were never seen working alone. Groups of 3 or 4 were the smallest Jean spotted that morning. In village after village, basic hospitality was not yet cooled, but there was certainly a crust forming over it. Wells were guarded. Wagons were circled together and obviously watched. Smaller children were not seen roaming free. Past noon, at a crossroads called Mirandel's Meeting, Locke and Jean sought directions from the brusque keeper of a public house that boasted more sky than roof overhead. Thatch and ladders were scattered around the yard, but the persons responsible for roof work had turned invisible, and the keeper did not seem concerned with tracking them down. Lunch was cups of ale like malted lake water, and then eggs fussed at in a heated pan until they turned just pliable enough to safely move, and then more lake water. For this they haggled as though Mirandel's Meeting were the last human habitation in the world, as though eggs had to be mined from the deep earth like diamonds. The 3 of them had fun. By the end of the meal, the keeper felt compensated or entertained enough to impart his full knowledge of the road to them. According to him, if they were to keep walking in the direction they had been facing when they arrived, they would surely arrive somewhere else eventually. For this deep wisdom they gave solemn thanks and moved on. Despite the keeper's haziness on all things beyond the 40-yard radius that defined his world, his advice had merit. Locke and John's only imperative now was to move away from Carthage, away from every land adjacent to or dependent upon Carthage, without actually casting themselves into the roadless wilds where gods knew what misfortunes crouched in wait. Continuing vaguely east was in their interest, east until they found sufficient husks of civilization to burrow into and vanish. And so they walked and split from the last byways to the coast road that would have wound back down to La Chine, and headed in the likely direction of the old heartlands of the Theron throne, and another 1,000 miles or so past that, 1,000 miles they had no intention of traveling, the approximate direction of Camor. Likely was the best they could hope for, as neither of them had ever seen, much less memorized, anything but the most general, fanciful sort of map of the continent they lived upon. Jean expected, meaning he hoped, to be able to request itineraries in towns along the way, and to find waystones here and there, great slabs of polished stone engraved with symbolic diagrams of points along the old Theron throne roads. Many of the names of those places would have changed, and some of the places themselves would be gone, but the roads themselves did not move. For convenience's sake, the Theron city-state still conformed largely to the bones of the old empire. And so they spent the rest of the day atread, and the cracks in the clouds were glowing like gold veins in a rock face when they finally sought rest. At a grim hamlet they bargained for a spot beneath a farmer's hedge, which was given to them in exchange for a small buckle and a bit of needlework from Jean's capable fingers. The farmer's family seemed completely disinterested in their story about being wandering scholars. Locke and John were politely informed that outlanders were all weird gods botherers and their particular business mattered not, provided they kept to their hedge and molested none of the farm animals, in which instance they would be hacked up with pole saws. Locke and John allowed that this was a very fair arrangement. As they lay in their cloaks just past sunset, bone-tired, Jean heard the clatter of hooves in rapid passage down the nearby road from the direction they had come. Though he listened attentively, he heard nothing more of interest. No shouts, no consternation, no larger train of horses or carriages following. Could have been anything, he mused, as the noise of the hooves vanished into the soft sounds of the night. Jean sighed and put his back against Locke's. While there was little to envy in their accommodation, he did at least relish the feeling of invisibility their thick cover of branches gave him as the night deepened. Giving in to an impulse he usually tried to restrain, he slid a hand beneath his cloak and ran his fingers over a bound lock of hair that he kept in his jacket pocket. A strange sense of comfort and a sharp sense of regret at that touch, as always. Months had done nothing to take the edge off either sensation. At last, though, he let his thoughts dissolve into an aimless scatter. He briefly wondered if he ought to try and sit a watch, but it was too late and he was too exhausted. His slide into darkness was a pure relief. You guys still awake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, staring at a Microsoft Word document, so I just kind of had to guess as to what was going on behind it. But that is a bit from the Locke and John walk away from Carthane bit of More Than Fools Fill Graves.
Very
Okay.
cool. Very cool.
That was, yeah, I like the hark back to Ezri's lock of hair that she had given to Jean.
We are I'm taking a little more time in this one to kind of tug at the heartstrings of my poor readers, but I mean we are going to continue to see emotional fallout from that because Locke and John have a lot of time in the wilderness to explore certain feelings and talk about certain things. And when they are not constantly beset by various schemes, I'm kind of using the opportunity to do not just back and forth between Locke and John, but a little bit of exploration into religion and philosophy and the state of the world, and just there's a lot of incident crammed into these novellas. There are a lot of things that are going to be happening, but there's a lot of stopping to smell the roses. There's a lot of sitting down to tell stories and ask questions and explore a little bit more about the world. So yeah.
Really, speaking of Locke and Jean's relationship, um, especially in regards to each of them having romantic relationships now, I love that Red Seas gave Jean a romantic relationship to a point where he didn't have that before, and Locke had it before, so it was something Jean couldn't understand. And then so Jean had it, and then they both now have lost it. And
Hmm.
so they had the opportunity, which they we hadn't had time to explore since they left Tal Varar and arrived in Lashane, and then Locke dying. They didn't have much of a chance to kind of relate on the fact of Jean realizing, like, oh, Locke, you haven't been just a bastard about you know all these times, like, why don't you just get over her, why don't you just get over her? It's like now he understands, um and going right into Sabbatha being returning, and so now, like, Jean's like, oh, she's back. Well, now I don't have this feeling. Jean can never have that feeling of his romantic partner returning. So that whole kind of journey there is very interesting,
Hmm.
um, to me. And I hope we get Sabbatha. I hope we see her again. Um,
Oh, I'm confident that we will. It's it's just it's I and, I mean, all other things set aside. In book 5 is going to be a flashback, current time, in much the same way that Republic of Thieves was. Book 5, the Ministry of Necessity, is going to pick up from basically the end of the past thread, um, in Republic of Thieves, and is going to follow basically all of the Gentleman Bastard's backstory up to the point that they are who they are at the beginning of the Lies of Locke Lamora. Basically, you know, Sabbatha is gone, Chains is gone, and they're all still in Camor. And then there may be smaller flashbacks after that, but book 5 is the end of the main sequence of flashbacks.
Sounds great.
I hope so. It's a beautiful, beautiful plan on paper. And you know, it's also you know, your plans never survive first contact with the characters that you put into the novels. But at this point, I'm reasonably confident that you know, the characters have demanded certain adjustments to the storyline, and I think we're in a good place moving forward.
Okay. Any final things, Justin?
I'm good. Been a very cool conversation. Nice to
Yeah.
meet you again.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise. Like I said, I hope I haven't put you guys to sleep. Any idea when you were thinking of actually releasing this podcast to the public?
It will either be this Friday or the following
Okay.
Friday.
Okay.
So
Okay, then I can't impart any other cool secrets. I have to keep my mouth shut. But yeah. Wahaha.
Well, good things to look forward to.
maybe when the recording's on. No. we can make. We'll just let our listeners wonder if we know the secret or not.
Yeah.
You can just pretend that there were large, drunken, unedited segments that were not meant to be recorded. Brandon Sanderson, that bastard. So he took my notebook and the Cosmere is my invention, and George R. R. Martin did the same thing.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time, Scott. This has been, I didn't know what this was going to be, but it's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Well, your questions are good. I mean, you guys got me wound up in talking for 9 million years, which is typically how it happens. But it's been fun.
If you can, if people start talking to me about certain things and I'd start talking, I feel good about myself, and then they feel good because they're like, hey, that guy's passionate about that stuff. This is definitely on display here. So we gave you questions and you ran with it, and you gave us gold, proverbial
Awesome.
gold.
Well, I mean, I hope your listeners, I hope your audience likes it. I hope the folks you've read the books with get something of use out of it. And if you guys ever want to talk again, after the novellas or after Thorn of Emberlane, you got my contact info. Drop me a line.
Awesome. All right. Well, if
you guys still want to talk to me after whatever happens in the next book, you just we'll see.
Yeah, the tone
put
might
a
be
pin in that,
different.
and we'll see how you feel.
Yeah. So, all right. If y'all have made it this far without falling asleep, or if you took a nap and you woke up and you're at the end, cool.
Just take a little nappy nap every time I open my mouth, and you'll be fine. You get a lot of rest.
Go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe, follow, share, leave a rating or review where you can if you want. It helps the podcast get into the eyes.
Do it. I'm holding characters hostage. I've killed characters before. I'll fucking do it again.
He's gonna kill a character.
Subscribe, or I will fucking kill somebody else. I will.
You're gonna kill one of Brandon Sanderson's characters.
That's right. That's right. Like or subscribe, or I'll start killing Brandon Sanderson's characters. Then he and me and his lawyers can have a long chat that will be really, really amusing for his lawyers. Less so for me.
Yeah. And if you haven't read, Scott's books, you should go do so now that you've been spoiled on a whole lot of them. But
wait, why have you been listening to? I'm looking at you. Yes, if you've been listening to this but haven't read the books, the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I'm not even sad about spoiling the books for you. Rosebud is a sled.
It is. visit our sponsor, Mudcat Whiskers. Don't forget the Paperweights code at checkout gives you 15%. And the cool thing about that is Nick is a school teacher, and all of the profits, I think, from his sales of that company goes back into his robotics and STEM classroom. So
Oh, cool.
helps that out. It's always good to help kids learn. And until the next time, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Totally
thank
my
you.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.